Hey guys, how's it going? Reed here. I didn't realize I was live, but here making some coffee, make some tea. How's it going? Today we're going to go over serotonin receptors. Um, Serotonin is very important. Very important. You know, every time I think of a new neurotransmitters, it seems like when they're in excess, they present with a certain type of symptoms, a certain symptomatology, a certain patterns, And when the same neurotransmitters are diminished, they present with another presentation and more of the withdrawn phase of that disorder, right? So remember dopamine, excessive dopamine, right? Um, Psychoticism, delusions, and sometimes delusions are very uncomfortable to think about, And when excessive dopamine, you sort of think about a horror story, right? Excessive dopamine sounds like a horror movie, right? And excessive norepinephrine is more like when you hear at the end of the Super Bowl, right when they win the Super Bowl, hey, 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 where you going after the Super Bowl? I'm going to Disney World, right? That's like what I sort of like think about stories when there's excessive amounts of norepinephrine, and then I start thinking things like mania, right? Mania, you know. Um, and again, it may not even be mania. It may be that the person is simply mismatched with the environment at the time. And the people who are slow are referring it to as mania because it makes them feel better. But when you think about excessive norepinephrine, think about mania, you know. And then here we're going to do the one on serotonin, excessive serotonin, love, things like that, right? Affection and things like that, falling in love, you know, the sense of warmness, sense of oneness, unity. And of course, low level of serotonin, depression, and anxiety, right? So we're going to go over the we're going to go over the serotonin receptor, um, and let's see here. So I have here. Okay, let me see here. Or is this one better? This one's bigger. That's big. Good. Okay, how about this one? Okay, so this is just a free grok, and you can use anyone you want. Explain serotonin receptors. Okay, let's see what we get here. I hope I'm connected. Let me turn a little music off here. Okay, let's see. Explain serotonin receptor. Look, distribution here. Serotonin receptors are found in the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord. Also in the peripheral nervous system, other tissues like the gut. Remember, you give SSRIs and things like that, they can have like GI upset right there. Blood vessels, remember lightheadedness, dizziness, high hypotension. It can cause those as side effects. Changes in your cardiac arrhythmia, things like that. Okay, the various locations explain, the varied locations explain serotonin's wide range effects. Okay, so that's why this is the distribution to other tissues is one of the reasons why you get side effects and why they present the way they do. So whenever I give patients with these SSRIs, watch out for any lightheadedness, nausea, vomiting, or dizziness, things like that. So let's get into it. Okay, so serotonin receptors are a group of proteins found on cell surfaces that bind to serotonin, right? 5-hydroxytryptamine, okay, or 5-HT. The neurotransmitter involves in regulating, mood, sleep, appetite, memory, and other physiological processes. Remember appetite. Remember, these receptors are responsible for these like domains of functions, just like mood, like sleep, like appetite, like memory, and other physiological processes like weight gain and things like that, energy level, interest, and things like that. But isn't this all of the symptoms of depression, right? When you ask someone about depression, don't you ask about mood? Yeah, how are you sleeping? I'm not sleeping well. I can't fall asleep, or it takes too long to fall asleep, or I'm sleeping too much and really tired. Memory, hey, it's impacting my memory. I can't think about things, and other physiological processes like weight loss or weight gain, things like that. So you can see the symptoms of the SIGI caps. I guess the symptoms of depression are basically attached to the domains of things that this receptor is responsible for. So these receptors are critical for maintaining serotonin's effects on the body and brain, right? Okay, there are 7 main families of serotonin receptors, H1 through 7, with multiple subtypes, 5-HT1A, 5-HT2B, things like this, making at least a total of 14 known receptors. Right, okay, so there's at least a total of 14 known serotonin receptors. Okay, each play a distinct role and location, distinct role, then they're located at certain locations, and then they have slightly different mechanisms. So I don't want to go into the details of this, but let me just go through the distribution here. So these at 5-HT1 receptors are generally inhibitory, right? It reduces neuronal activity. Okay, look at this one. I think it's 5-18, which is the other one. Yep, okay, 5 right here. And 5-HT5 receptors are also inhibitory. So the inhibitory receptors, if I can remember correctly, HT1 and 5. So these are all inhibitory, and they decrease neuronal activity. Less understood, but likely inhibitory. Okay. Now, the H2, the other receptors, excitatory, increase neuronal activity, causing the fast excitatory response. Okay, 4, stimulatory, enhances GI cognitive motility and cognitive function. Excitatory, 5, inhibitory. And I think the 6, is it excitatory too? Yeah, I'm not sure about this one. 7, excitatory. So remember, 14 total receptors, 2 categories, 1 and 5 are like inhibitory, the other ones are sort of excitatory. And so if you're thinking about if someone presents with depression, a significant amount of anxiety, sort of think about these serotonergic networks being somewhat hypoactive, right? And so we'll need to sort of activate these networks, and so they're more active and we get more transmission. If we get more transmission across these networks, then the lobe is carrying out its responsibility better, right? Okay, so here, those are the 2 types. Okay, so remember we were same thing with the receptors and the networks and the proteins, all that 2 types, the ion gated channels, and then the G protein channels, the ionotropic and metabotropic sort of pathways. Here it is here. The duality presents right here also, because you see the G protein receptors and ligand gated ion channels. So G protein receptors, most serotonin receptors, 3 are G protein receptors, right? So remember, around 14 of these receptors, yeah, at least 14 of the receptors. Um, Most of the serotonin receptors, except 3, are G proteins, which trigger intracellular signaling pathways, um, including cyclic AMP or calcium release when serotonin binds, meaning it alters the cell functioning. This is very important because remember the ion gated channels are important in the signal in initiating the action potential and that form of communication that almost happens instantly. But then the G protein is a possible. This is the process that allows the signal transduction pathway, and that's where we're going to actually create a specific message for the cell body to produce a product. And when it says altering gene function, when the serotonin binds to the receptor, it goes through the signal transduction pathway and produces a product that's then exported from the cell. Then that's when you get an alteration in cell function. Ligand gated channels, these allow rapid inflow of sodium across the membrane, causing immediate neuronal excitation. So here, okay. The physiological and clinical relevance, mood and mental health. 5, 1, and 2 are receptors are key targets for antidepressants. Okay, 5-HT1A, 5-HT1-2, they increase serotonin availability, right? Great. 3 and 4, GI. Okay, 6 and 7, neurological disorders. Many drugs, including psychedelics, migraine medications, sumatriptans, and antiemetics, target specific serotonergic receptors. Makes sense. Okay, distribution. Oh, we got through that pretty fast. Okay, and let me see if you have any questions now. Just ask me questions if you have it. So this is for the serotonin receptor. Okay. Let me look at the serotonin molecule. I will see if it can do that. I won't be able to go through this. I remember organic chemistry. Okay, let me see here. Even if I read this, I wouldn't understand it. so let me move on. It's so disconnected from what I do. I was hoping. Let me see if I can find a image of this serotonin. Okay, maybe this is the source. Okay. All right. Serotonin is also known as 5-hydroxytryptamine. Has a molecular formula here. Features 5. Okay, yeah, this is okay. Yeah, let me skip that too. Okay. Let me review the SSRI medications. Okay, I don't know if that's. I meant SSRIs. Okay. Okay, so um, we use SSRIs for the primary treatment for major depressive disorder, depressions, and anxieties, and it's believed that it's hypoactivity in these networks. And so we use a category of medications called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. These basically turn off the reuptake pump that's located on the presynaptic cell. When you don't get as much reuptake of the serotonin from the synaptic cleft into the cell, then more of the serotonin, the tighter increases in the synaptic cleft, and the larger the titer, then hopefully we can increase the transmission. So that's the thought behind it. There are class of antidepressants that work primarily by blocking serotonin transporters, which increase serotonergic level in the synaptic cleft, enhancing serotonergic transmission. This mechanism helps alleviate the symptoms of a major depressive disorder, anxiety disorder, OCD, PTSD, and other conditions. SSRIs are considered a first-line treatment for depression due to their efficacy, relatively favorable side effect profile, and lower toxicity compared to tricyclic antidepressants and MAOs. Mechanism here. SSRIs selectively inhibit serotonin reuptake with a minimal effect on other neurotransmitters, reducing side effects compared to less selective drugs. They primarily interact with serotonin receptors indirectly by increasing available serotonin, which then activates receptors like the 5-HT1A and the 5-HT2A. Okay, so it's approved for major depression, generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, panic disorders, OCD, PTSD, and also premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Side effects: lightheadedness, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, some sexual dysfunction, decreased libido, possible weight gain, typical side effect profile. But look, side effects. SSRIs different half-life. Metabolism is via the cytochrome P450 system, mainly the 2D6 and the 3,4-A pathways, and drugs, and interacts with potential drugs. Yeah, see, Prozac has the longest half-life, is days to week. They even have a tablet like called Prozac Weekly. You take once or more. There's some versions that have a half-life less than 24 hours. Okay, so here's another thing that you may want to find interesting here. This is a list of SSRIs ordered by potency, right? The strongest ones first. Because if you're in an outpatient setting, if you have someone with like a major depressive disorder, but it doesn't seem to be maybe on the mild to moderate spectrum, then you want to use the less potent ones. And for the ones that may experience treatment refractory or things like that, or if their depression is mediated by something other than serotonin, then you may want to go with one of these stronger, more potent SSRIs. So here, Paxil, I mean, this is really Paxil is very good medication. It works very well. It's a very potent medication. We give it at night because it can lead to some sedation and dry mouth. It's used for major depressive disorders, OCD, particularly OCD, and PTSD and things like that. 60 milligrams a day, half-life less than 21 hours. Yeah, you have to prepare your patients with Paxil too, because it can cause a lot of anxiety when you're starting it. Zoloft. Okay, here's the Ki. The affinity here is 0.13, 0.29. I don't know what that is. Okay, then we have Celexa, right? Escitalopram, Lexapro, right here. Fluoxetine, Prozac, Luvox, citalopram, Celexa, one of the weakest ones, right? Paxil, one of the strongest. So look, Paxil, Zoloft, Lexapro, Prozac, Zoloft. Now the atypical. Now let me look at the atypical things later. And I think that's all I wanted to do for now. We went over the serotonin receptor, tried to go through the molecules, diagnosis. I think that's it for now. Okay, guys, I think that's all I'm going to do for today. I'll leave it there. We're at 20 minutes. I don't want to go too far over 20 minutes. But if you have any questions for me, you can please leave them in the comment section. And please like, subscribe, and share. Read out. It's been a pleasure, guys. Take care. Ciao.